Hello, guys. How are you? I hope you're having a nice day. As you can tell by the title of the video, today is story time. Now, back in 1992, I met this guy. At that time, I was working in home health private duty in the northwest suburbs, and he also worked and lived in the northwest suburbs. He seemed like he was a pretty decent person. He would take me to the movies, take me out to eat. If he got off from work before I did, he would pick me up at the bus stop and take me to my next job. And then when I got home from work, I would let him know I made it safe, and we would talk until I fell asleep. Now, we had been seeing each other for about 8, maybe 9 months. And then one day he tells me that he had to move. Well, at that time, my mom's and I had bought about 2 years earlier this 13-bedroom home, and we was renting out part of it to different tenants to bring in some income. And there was plenty of room, so I told him he could come out and stay with me. Now, I ended up quitting my job because I got tired of going back and forth to the suburbs on the bus and everything. And I didn't have to suffer for any money because, like I said, we was renting out some of the rooms for income. Of course, when this guy moved in, he quit his job too. Typical, right? Well, everything was going okay between the two of us until it was time to collect rent from the tenants. And that's when I noticed that he had a real bad jealous tendency. He didn't want me to talk to any of the male renters. He wanted to be the one to collect the money. And if there was a problem, he wanted to handle it. And when I told him that he couldn't do that, that was my job, he got angry and upset, and he started doing little crazy things. Like if we went shopping for clothes or something, if he saw me put something in a cart that he thought I might wear for another man, when I turned my back to pick up something else and turn back around, whatever I put in the cart would be gone. And then he got where he started tearing up the property. He would get mad and punch holes in the walls and everything. So I had to figure out a way to get away from him. And my ultimate plan was to get rid of him. But I wanted to do it peacefully where it wouldn't cause a disturbance in the household. So what I started doing, I started working again, and I would do overnight care in the private homes for senior citizens Saturday morning to Monday morning. And then he wanted to follow me to work, meet the people I was taking care of. If I called on the phone to let him know I made it to work safe, he wanted to talk to the people there and everything. So by this time, I knew it was getting out of hand, and I definitely needed to get rid of him. So one day I ended up running into an old friend, and he wanted to take me out to dinner. Well, to keep everything on the up and up and legitimate, I decided to invite my twin brother and his girlfriend along at the time. At the house, there was my nephew's mom. Now, bear with this story because she's a part of what's going to happen at the end. I ended up telling her about the date and everything, and my brother's girlfriend had 3 kids. And so my nephew's mom asked, well, who's going to take care of the kids while you go out? Now, I never told her who I was going out with. I just told her that, I was going out, me, my twin brother, and his girlfriend. So I told her, I said, well, I'll pay, moms to babysit the kids and everything. So as we were talking, her and I used to always hang out together and do stuff together when I wasn't working. So we decided to go clothes shopping. Well, my brothers girlfriend heard us talking about going clothes shopping, and she asked to go along too. So my nephew's mom and I, we looked at each other because it was just supposed to be the two of us, but we said, okay, you can come along. So when we got to the store, my nephew's mom, she picked out a pair of shoes, a blouse and a skirt, which I told her I would pay for it because I loved her so much. I was always doing something for her. And then my brother's girlfriend, she came up and she had a pair of shoes in her hand. So she told me, she said, if you pay for these shoes for me, I'll pay you back when I get my food stamps. So I told her, I said, no, I said, I'm not going to take the food out of your kids' mouths to cover a pair of shoes. So I asked her, I said, well, how much are the shoes? And I think they was about $20, no big deal. So I said, well, I'll pay for the shoes. So after all three of us got back home, my nephew's mom pulled me to the side and she said, are you still planning on paying moms to babysit the kids while you guys go out? And I asked her, I said, well, what do you mean? I said, what are you talking about? She said, because you paid for the shoes. She said, who's going to pay for their part of the dinner? Are you paying for the dinner too? And I said, yeah, I'm going to foot the bill for everything. So my nephew's mom said, well, you paid for the shoes, you're going to pay for the dinner. I think it would be no more than fair for her to pay moms for babysitting. And she said, if I was you, I would tell her. So I did just that. I went to my brother's girlfriend and I told her, that I think she should pay for the moms to babysit because I had paid for the shoes and I was also paying for the dinner. Well, my brother's girlfriend got upset, but she did it anyway. She agreed to pay for everything. So a few days later, it was time to meet my friend so we can go out to dinner. I left the house first because I didn't want the guy that was living there to know what was going on. So I left the house first, and then about 45 minutes or an hour later, my brother and his girlfriend left the house, and we all met up and we went over to my friend's house. And we went out to dinner. We didn't stay that long, just about 2 or 3 hours because my friend had to go to work the next day. But I thought it was nice to have some type of grown-up conversation and company besides all the BS and crap that was going on at the house. So when we got back, everything was okay. Everybody was acting normal. The guy that was living there, he was acting normal. But when I went to work, the weekend job, the following weekend, and came back home, all his stuff was gone out of the house. And the only thing he left was a note that said, I know you went out to dinner with some guy and I hope you had a nice time. Now, my brother's girlfriend, she ended up moving out before he did. So she moved out in the middle of the week, and because they ended up breaking up, and then the guy that was staying there, he ended up moving out on the weekend. And I showed the note to my nephew's mom, and I said, you know what happened? You know who did this. And so my nephew's mom was asking, well, what's going on? And I explained to her that the guy that my brother's girlfriend, ex-girlfriend, had told the guy that was staying there that we all went out to eat with my friend. So I asked her, because we knew where my brother's ex-girlfriend, we knew where she lived at. And I asked my nephew's mom to take me over there. And at first she didn't want to take me over there. She kept saying, no, I'm not going to take you over there because I don't want there to be any trouble. I don't want you getting into a fight. I don't want you getting arrested. I don't want you to cause a scene. So I told her, I said, I just want to talk to her and, just talk to her. I'm not going to start any trouble. And my nephew's mom was a little hesitant at first, but then she agreed to take me over there. So when we got to where my brother's ex-girlfriend lived at, my nephew's mom had parked on the street. And she looked at me and she says, well, how do you know that she's here? And I looked over in the parking lot and I said, because there's her car. So she said, please don't embarrass me. Don't start any trouble out here. We don't want to get into any trouble. And I looked at her and I said, I promise you, there isn't going to be any trouble. So I got out of the car and I called up to the apartment. I didn't even knock on the door. I just called up to the apartment. Now, where my brother's ex-girlfriend moved to, and she had moved in with this other guy, these apartments reminded you of a motel. There was the parking lot, and then there was a row of apartments on the ground level, and then you go up a set of stairs, and then there was another row of apartments, and with the railing and everything, and you could see the doors and the apartment numbers on the doors and everything. So she came outside and she was holding a baby in her arms. And she looked at me and she said, what are you doing here? I looked up and I said, I came here to thank you. And she looks at me real funny. She said, thank me? Thank me for what? I said, I'm here to thank you for telling my guy, that we went out on a date with an old friend. Because if you hadn't have told him, I said, he would have never left. I said, you know how long I've been trying to get rid of him? I said, and because you told him, he volunteered and left on his own. So my brother's ex-girlfriend looked at me and said, well, how do you know I told? And I told her, I said, because you are the only person that knew what we were doing, where we were going, and when we were going. I said, my brother wouldn't tell the guy anything. I said, because he never liked him. I said, it had to be you, because nobody else knew but you, the three of us, you, me, and my brother. And I told her again, I said, I'm just here to thank you for what you did for me. So I got back in the car, and my nephew's mom looked at me really crazy, and she said, you mean to tell me you had me bring you all the way over here just to thank her for telling what you guys did? And I told my nephew's mom, I said, yeah. I said, I had to thank her. I said, to let her know that I knew what she did and she wasn't getting away with it. So I cut a lot of stuff out of the story. I wanted it to be short. The moral of the story is, the sweetest revenge that you can have on anybody that tries to do some type of harm to you for no reason is to let them know that they helped you instead of hurting you. And like I always say at the end of every video, let's work together to live better. And always, always, thank you for watching. And I hope you enjoyed the story.